Welcome back to the Hawkeye Garage. I am Joe. This week we have more mountain bike stuff. We are going to talk about the Sram GX Eagle crankset and bottom bracket that I put on my mountain bike a month or so ago. We're going to talk about why I think it's a crap design and some problems I've been having with it. So stay tuned. Yes, that's right. If you haven't seen the video on the install and some of the info on that, link in the description down below. Go check that video out. I have a 2021 Trek Roscoe 7. Came standard with SRAM SX cranks and bottom bracket. It was just a square taper bottom bracket and standard cast aluminum crank. They're fine. They're not super strong. It's pretty heavy. That's why I upgraded to the SRAM stuff. I wanted to keep all SRAM drivetrain. That's why I did that. Went to the dub style through kind of axle through crank bottom bracket, sealed bearings. It's a lot stronger, it's a lot sturdier, it's a lot stiffer, and to its credit, it is. I went with the GX cranks because they are considerably lighter, not that much more expensive. They're not cheap, and for the most part, like the build quality, I guess, is pretty good. The design, how it all goes together and how it kind of functions together, is terrible in my opinion. So I've got a lot to talk about. Let's point the camera down here. Let's talk about a few things and we'll go from there. All right, yes, here is the cranks. I'm running an absolute black 32 tooth oval narrow wide chainring. That has been awesome. I got that lightly used off Facebook. Highly recommend those. I do really like the direct bolt on style sprocket, and yeah, the chainring. Man, sprocket, that takes, I was like a teenager when that's what we called it on bikes back, well, probably the pros called it a chainring, but we called it a sprocket. Anyway, got some one-up pedals now, cool there. So what are some of the problems that I have been having? The first time I took it out was a camping weekend, so I rode quite a bit. Campground, a little bit of trail riding. The bolt down here, this big old Allen bolt, 8mm Allen key that screws this crank to the through part of the other crank, kept coming loose, like really loose, and I wasn't doing like an insane amount of miles or super hard riding. Yeah, it just kept coming loose. I will be the first to admit, I didn't torque it to spec. I'd watched several videos on people installing these. They said just install it tight. It's relatively low torque number, and it's probably written on here. What does this say? Let's look. 54 Newton meters. Yeah, that's not much. So it kept coming loose. Also, if we go to the other side, this is my first big issue. We have this outer, so this part right here, this grooved part, that is the bottom bracket. That is all the bearings and stuff that threads into the frame. This part is threaded on to the through part of the crank. That's like, this is all one piece, it's all pressed together. That is like a universal thing, so that no matter what the width of your bottom bracket is, you can just tighten that up and it takes up the gap, and then you cinch it down with a teeny tiny, let's see if we can find it, teeny tiny little Allen screw. And it's all plastic and it's crap. So that side was coming loose. How do you guys like my rear hub now? Sounds awesome. That'll be the next video. I digress. So the crank on that side was coming loose, but I think partially it was coming loose because this kept backing out. And I had tightened that screw down. Again, it's a teeny tiny little screw. It was a super low torque spec because this is plastic. Tightened it to the point where like it was starting to kind of twist the plastic. I was like, oh, don't want to do that any tighter. So yes, that kept backing out. So I got back to the camp. I tightened that bolt and I was like, why is my cranks still loose? Because this had backed out. So I cranked that down, tightened that up. Again, what I felt was a fair amount of tightness. And following that trip, I took to one of the hardtail message boards that I'm on Facebook. And I was like, this has got to be a common issue, so there's got to be a fix for it. And everyone laughed and even the people who had them, like, yep, that's how it goes. They're pretty terrible. You're pretty lucky that the dust cover and the actual, like, so like this is like a little cap that's pressed in there to keep that bolt stuck in there. You're lucky that didn't fall off and you lost the bolt, because SRAM sells a replacement kit. This happens so much. You can buy a replacement kit for this because it backs out, gets loose, pops that off, and your crank arm falls off. So, like, I'm all for a universal fit design. I understand companies have to make things that can fit a multitude of sizes, especially on mountain bikes where there's not really any one standard, unfortunately. There's lots of really common, but not necessarily standards, especially, as far as the bottom bracket widths. And then you have boost spacing that comes into play, which is how you have to space your cranks to the left or the right. We'll talk about that in a second. I understand. And I got on, I was like, surely somebody makes like a brass or an aluminum adjuster ring to go on that other side to take up. No one does. I think no one does, because they have all realized this is a terrible design and they're not going to even bother with trying to band-aid it so much. So my solution, and it's been working, has been, let's look down here again if we can. You see where it says the torque spec? Just on the inside of that to the frame, there's a little shim. And on the other side, there is another one. Now, when you get your packaging, there will be several of those for the inside of the bottom bracket, so to go between the bottom bracket and the frame, and ones to go on the outside of the bottom bracket, between the bottom bracket and your cranks. I completely understand the need for that. It has to do with your boost spacing, your axle spacing, so you can space the cranks out away from the frame the correct distance so you can line your chain up. That makes sense. So what I ended up doing was, I had followed the spec given in the box because I have a chain guide here bolted directly to the bike. Trek came with that bracket. I added the chain guide just because it was stupid to have a bracket there with nothing on it. But when I was in my big gear, the chain rubbed on this. Now, it is what it is. Not a big deal. I could have put some spacers in there or some small washers. I could have made it work. But I've kind of killed two birds with one stone, as I have added that spacer between the frame and the bottom bracket over there to make the bottom bracket wider, which took up the gap that I would have had to screw down that adjuster ring. So I have that backed all the way out against the crank arm. So I have essentially made the bottom bracket the correct width for the actual width to tighten these cranks down to spec. I hope that makes sense to you guys. So there is supposed to be a spacer. Now you can't see it because the chain ring is in there. There's supposed to be a spacer on the outside of the bottom bracket on this side to space the chain ring away from the bottom bracket a little bit, to take into account if you are running a chain guide. The box spec said 2 mil spacer. I have taken that out, added a 3 mil spacer, and then with the other 2 mil spacer on the other side, I can sandwich this all together, tighten this down just a little bit over spec so that I still have plenty of play as far as, like, it's not so tight that the cranks don't want to spin freely. I don't have to have that stupid adjuster. I don't touch my chain guide when I'm in my big gear, and my cranks are still plenty far away. So this is called your Q factor. It is how far your cranks are away from each other. It's basically how far your feet stand away from each other. Now, it's hard to tell on camera here. I have that lizard skin frame protector. There is actually a 1 or 2 mil gap in there, but I just can't get it on camera. So that's like an awesome gap there. We go over to the other side, and it's a little bit bigger gap than what the other side is. it looks a lot bigger on camera because I have the frame protector on the other side, but realistically, I checked it before I put that frame protector on. It's maybe 1 mil difference, so you're never even going to notice it. I've realized that I kind of have a wider Q factor. I'm not a big dude. Well, I'm kind of chunky, but I'm not like a big dude. But I have a comfortably wide Q factor, so it works. It seems to work. It's been staying tight. Everyone on the forum says, clean that bolt, clean all the threads really good with degreaser, use some blue Loctite, crank it on there like hand tight, but like tight by hand. I just use like the T-handled torque wrenches. I didn't use like a ratchet or anything. And I've had good luck with it. I've taken it apart since because I wanted to clean everything, check out how everything was doing. I added some more Teflon tape because they were getting a little squeaky. Torqued everything back down, and so far so good. All right, I realize I just like vomited a ton of words and information at you guys. But if you have this on your bike and you installed it yourself and you're having this issues, it made sense. I know that it did, and you know that I know that it did. You know, it kind of sucks because like when I went to the forums, like no one was mean about it, but everyone was like, yep, that's kind of how those are. And we all either just bought something else or we dealt with it. So, you know, I didn't want to buy another set of cranks because I have investment in these. That has been my fix. I've had no problems with my chain line, having the cranks a little bit further apart, having that chain ring spaced out a little bit further. And that's been my fix. I will never buy another set of these cranks. Everyone said buy Shimano or Raceface. I think I'll be doing that from now on. And yeah, kind of sucks that such a theoretically nice crankset has been ruined by such a terrible design by such a reputable company. So I don't know if there is like an actual good fix for that, or like maybe I got like last year's stock and this year's stock is better and I just don't know that. Please hit me up in the comments down below. Speaking of that, yes, leave comments. I answer all of them. If you would like to talk in more depth and more detail, longer conversation, please feel free to email me, hawkeyeskunkworks@gmail.com. And yeah, subscribe if you haven't already. Give the video a thumbs up, turn the notifications on. I've got 3rd Gen 4Runner stuff coming out. You're gonna see several videos where I'm wearing the exact same thing coming up because I have a free night, so I'm going to film. I'm going to do a rear wheel video on the Roscoe as well, and why I think plus size tires are stupid, having owned one now. So look forward to watching that video, and follow the links down below, or to my Instagram, my Facebook, where I post all kinds of stuff all the time. So until the next video drops, thank you for watching, take care, goodbye.